Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today we bring back Chris McCabe. Hey Chris, how you doing?
Hey, Danny.
Excellent. Right, okay, let's get straight into it. The audience know you well. You've been on a few times. I want to talk to you today, which I seem to be more common than a lot of these suspensions through my eyes. I know you're the suspension guy, so they come across your desk.
I talk about it every day. I talk about inauthentic suspensions on a daily basis. When I'm out in Seattle, I'm talking to Amazonians about inauthentic suspensions and what they mean in this case versus that case, because I'm trying to separate the different types of inauthentic suspensions into different buckets, right? Different categories of suspension. They kind of lumped these together. Now, to talk about that, you have to go back to maybe 2011, 2012, when they started this, put together a product quality team. They call it product quality, right?
Yeah.
And this is part of their parameters were defining types of complaints from buyers about condition, about quality.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this was sort of in the formation while I was still at Amazon in my kind of last months there. I didn't agree with it at the time, and I don't agree with it now. I think the term inauthentic, unfortunately, was chosen as a catch-all phrase to lump all of these types of different complaints together because they didn't want to split hairs. They didn't want to divide or subdivide this category into the minutia of different kinds of condition complaints and quality complaints. Yeah. Inauthentic in the rest of the world means fake or counterfeit.
Yes.
Right? Not genuine, not legitimate product. And that's the way a lot of sellers still interpret it, which is the way the outside world looks. But I guess if we can accomplish anything today, it's change your mind around to the way Amazon views authenticity.
Yeah.
They've got huge anti-counterfeiting measures that they're and standard operating procedures around identifying potential counterfeit, but inauthentic doesn't necessarily mean counterfeit. Yeah. It could refer to item condition. In other words, your item doesn't look new. You think it's new. It could mean that the item, the item packaging doesn't look right to the buyer, doesn't match the last time it looked when they bought it. It might have foreign language, foreign alphabet on it. Yeah. It doesn't look like the photo in some way, or they just don't like the quality. I mean, a lot of inauthentic complaints are really just, they boil down to item quality complaints. This isn't worth what I paid for it. This isn't the quality I expected based on the last time I bought it. Condition or quality complaints will all fall under this inauthentic banner.
Okay,
so a bit of a misnomer, but we have to live with it. Right?
Yeah, so it becomes a catch-all. Where are the likely triggers appearing from? Is it algorithmic based? Is it comments that are posted back to Amazon and that's picked up? Where are the key areas that that Amazon picks up on this and then sends you the dreaded alert?
The sources of the complaints. It could be the nature of a product review, how it's worded. Some of it's algorithmic, sure. Some of it's picked up by scripts. And you get an automated, those soft block listings, right? We've received too many returns on these items. Your return rate is this percentage, which is too high. And here are some of the sample buyer comments that we've had. You've seen those, the soft blocks, where you can actually relist it yourself. But that's kind of your heads up. That's your warning sign that you might have a notification coming in the future that the item isn't authentic. Yeah. Buyers directly contact Amazon through customer service. They report sellers for selling something other than what they expected, or an item that doesn't match the detail page in some way. So some of these are just, you've poorly described the item. So it's a not as described complaint as it's known. So that's why a lot of surprised private label sellers who are manufacturing their own products are being hit with these, wondering, what do you mean I have inauthentic items? These are my own items. And they waste a lot of time talking about, this is our brand, here's our trademark registration, here's our brand registry. You're off on the wrong path already, because this is really just somebody saying, this item isn't as it was described on the site. It's different somehow. It's a different item complaint. Yeah. So the misnomer, a lot of people waste time and energy trying to define these things and figure these things out. But Amazon doesn't want to be the party that has to figure it all out. They want you to tell them why you're getting these kinds of complaints. They want you to dig into Seller Central and look in your feedback, look in your claims, look at direct buyer messages to you, return reasons, anything that you can go through to tell them why they're getting complaints from buyers about the authenticity of the item.
And the irony is as well, is that you could be an FBA seller, you're sending your stock in, it gets damaged in the warehouse, they still send it out the door, or it gets damaged in transit.
Yep.
And then you get hit with one of those claims and you're thinking, hold on a minute, I've I've
Yeah.
gone through this. I've done inspections. You know, you take pride in your QC and everything else, but
Right.
you can still get hit with these claims. Now, before we move
Oh, of
into
course.
what we're doing with these claims, talk to me about which has become a lot more common, is when competitors are trying to stripe you up on these kind of complaints to take you out the game.
Right. And it's worth talking about brands brands are much more likely to use the inauthentic item path now than they were maybe a year or two ago. In the old days, they were just reporting people for counterfeit or for, straight up IP trademark complaints, like intellectual property complaints, right?
Yeah.
Brands, doing test buys, they know this works. They know inauthentic complaints will largely be taken on face value, I guess,
Yeah.
by Amazon investigators. And they know it works, and they know that you will be challenged to produce supply chain documentation as part of this process. Brands understand that very well, and that's why this is such an effective tool to report by brands reporting sellers who they don't want selling their products in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
So, and they also know that in some occasions, at least, you'll be asked for authenticity letters, which your supplier won't be able to provide a meaningful letter if the supplier really has no relation to the brand, right?
Yeah.
So this is all strategy, and sellers kind of need to catch up with this quickly if they're, especially, resellers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Private label sellers too are being accused of counterfeit of their own product, which we can talk about later.
Yeah.
But Amazon uses the inauthentic complaints to figure out your supply chain. Where is it coming from? Do you even know where it's coming from? Do you even inspect products? If you do, how do you inspect them? What's your quality control? But what do you have to show in terms of documentation? Because they're asking for more details in terms of, give us a verifiable website link to your supplier. If the supplier doesn't have a website, then you really don't have anything of value from them that you can sell on Amazon at this point.
Yeah, and I think which leads us to the next part is the standard mail that gets sent. There is one massive flaw that pretty much damages people time after time. So I'm going to read excerpts here. It says, we still need more information about the items, blah, blah, blah. The killer one here is supplier information.
Yep.
This is, for me, is one of the biggest fallovers of all of them, because again, about catch-all, if you're a private label seller and you are using a factory to manufacture your product, you are going to get invoices from your factory.
Yes.
Amazon rejects, because you effectively are the supplier and the seller. And because you're speaking, in terms of providing this information, sending it back, time and time again, I see this where people get rejected, where they're unfortunately the private label seller.
I'm not sure I 100% agree with that, because I have a lot of people who do produce documentation about where the items are manufactured and by who, and those are accepted.
Yeah.
I think what you're talking about is information that can't be verified online about the manufacturer, because then if they consider them non-verifiable, they'll say this, we need more information, right? That's why people typically get that we still need more information, because they think, oh, I'll send an invoice. Oh, I'll send a copy of a receipt. And they think that'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
But they want a lot more. They need the supplier information that you give them to be detailed and to match what matches their online search, their Google search, when they go looking to verify that supplier. It has to be both of those things.
Yeah.
If one of those things is missing, like the address doesn't match, for instance.
Yeah. No, I can tell you now is that I gave them, because normally what they say on the on with the invoices that you can blot out pricing and everything.
Right,
I wasn't worried. All I wanted to do was to get that listing nearly a couple of years ago now to get back online, and so I provided them with the factory. See, it doesn't have the brand name necessarily on the invoices when they're raised. Yeah. But
the items are on the invoice though, right?
Yeah, the items are, but they're not always marked out exactly how Amazon wants them. And they don't normally converse with you. They just send you the same email again, over and over again. Right. So you're looking at it and it's still saying supplier information. And I went for a stage where I sent them in the documents without touching them, because it says to you, do not annotate or anything like that, or you have a secondary set that you would annotate, but they want to make sure they're authentic. Yeah. So you send the documentation in and you explain to them, this is the company name,
right?
This is the brand on the packaging, and this is the factory. But even those
are these pro forma invoices. Don't forget, they won't accept commercial invoices, and they won't accept pro forma invoices. It has to be an invoice, which maybe there's some confusion over that, and I can understand actually some of that confusion.
Yeah, exactly. But, so what he says,
you can't present the brand information. I mean, some people had a photo of the item instead of an item description on the invoice, and that wasn't considered acceptable. So that's one bit of advice. Don't just have a photo of it. Yeah.
But you can see where I'm coming from, though, when it comes to the information that they're asking for. It's so broad that anyone could make this mistake, like literally anyone. And because when you send them in for the first time, look, you're an old hand at this. This is why people use your service to do so, right? Because you've seen it 100 times. I mean, I got a listing that I never got recovered because foolishly I sent it in numerous times. I even got to the point where I actually made supplier invoices and told Amazon and just basically said, look, I've sent this in 5 times now. I don't want to keep sending the same information in. I want to provide you with the right information, but we're a private label company. Here's the company name. Right. These are the products that are on the invoice, and these are the factory. I gave them the supplier person's name, factory detail. It all matches. Gave them
phone number. Give them a name. Give them a direct dial phone number. So that
I gave WeChat details. I gave the supplier's name and personal email. And
WeChat, they're probably not going to run that down. They're going to make
a phone. But you know what I'm saying? You put it all in there because what happens is you're trying to do the right thing by providing them the right information.
Right.
And even in the end, I created a set of supplier invoices, right? But I still sent them in the factory invoices and basically said, look, I'm sending the information. I'm giving you the information you required that I believe, but you're still sending me messages back. So obviously I'm missing something.
You could have escalated if they're refusing to review complete information that you're giving them, everything they've asked for and requested, then you can escalate that, right? You don't want to just waste your time sending the same thing over and over and getting the same response. You definitely don't want to make your own invoices just because, policy team investigators are barely reading what you're sending and just messaging back the same thing over and over. If they're knee-jerk messaging you, that means they're probably just looking at your account annotations, looking at what you sent. They've decided, oh, this is the same thing as last time. I'm going to send the same response that was sent last time by a different investigator. You just have to get out of that, loop. You're stuck chasing your own tail for a reason. They're not really planning to give you anything else until you do something else and change your behavior. That's the basis for a solid escalation. If you're sure that you're giving them not just the complete documentation, but verifiable information about, when they say supplier, obviously they mean the factory, the manufacturer, the wholesaler. I mean, supplier can mean a lot of different things.
Exactly.
Your problem, I mean, what some people face is they get off on the wrong foot. They send in a pro forma invoice, and I've seen, invoices that are stamped pro forma right on it, or they send a commercial invoice, and they are instantly kind of put in this outer orbit where nobody's really paying attention anymore, even after the first, they think, well, if they send us another invoice, we've been asking them for a real invoice and they haven't given it to us. So if they send us another one, maybe, they've edited or doctored it somehow. This is the big trend in product quality, accusing people, whether accurately or not, of doctoring.
Well, they did actually say, basically.
So they said that to you too. So they're saying it to everybody more or less.
So basically, the irony is that they accused me for faking invoices, but I said, if you actually read them out, because you rejected my factory invoices, I made you a set of supplier invoices to put all the information on and told you in the mail.
Don't make invoices under any circumstances.
No, exactly. I know that now, but at the time when you're on the death march and you're going, look, I've provided you this information over and over again. I actually made a set of invoices up, foolishly or not, to put all the information that they want. To put on there what they want, because you want to give Amazon what they want. So you're saying, here are the real invoices.
Oh yeah, I understand it completely.
Here's a set of supplier invoices with all the information you've asked for, because I can't doctor the other ones, because if I fake the other ones, then
Right.
what happens? They become inauthentic, and then my account gets banned for it. So
Right.
that's why you set up a
A
secondary.
lot of accounts got banned by people making their own invoices.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
for brand, for brand approvals and ungating purposes, people started hiring companies, black hat companies that were making invoices for people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's a whole other range of suspensions, which are very difficult to come back from, of course. So, that's why they started sending the messaging. People were confused, like, well, what do you need about our supplier exactly? What do you need about us? And that's why they put supplier info and, name, address, link to their website, phone number, etc. And also buyer information, because sellers didn't understand that your seller central information has to match what you have on the invoice.
Indeed, yeah.
A lot of them didn't understand, like, I gave them the invoice. It's the same invoice I've given them in the past. Now they're rejecting it. Why? Well, the first question is, does it match Seller Central? Well, no, it doesn't. Well, that's why.
I think sometimes when in Seller Central, people might put their registered business address.
Exactly.
And then on their invoice, they use in their office delivery address.
Yep.
Which can throw things out. So
everything has to match. It's just like the UK verification process that created so many miserable experiences for people. If there's a typo, if there's anything off, I have a client right now, they entered supplier information. This is before they hired me, when they were first appealing on their own, and there was a typo in the supplier name.
Yeah.
And that, I found out later that was cause for not only rejecting the invoice, but considering anything from that supplier invalid. And that's one of their big suppliers.
Yeah.
You have to just make sure before you send them anything. I understand people are sort of panicking if they've got tons of inventory sitting in FBA, they can't sell it until they get this ASIN reinstated. Obviously, if your account's suspended, you're panicking anyway. You can't rush this stuff. It's quality documentation that will get accepted, that's complete. It's not just that they might think you might be faking some of it. If they think it's incomplete, it's automatically per SOP not acceptable.
Yeah.
So that's just making sure you dot all your I's and cross your T's. That's the best way to avoid that. No other way.
So obviously we know to take emotion out of the whole process as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that what some people do is they end up copying in everyone. They do a Jeff bomb and God knows what. And so talk to me about the escalation and queues and stuff like that.
For stuff like this, escalate within the team that suspended the listing or account first. Yeah. Don't go straight to Jeff. I mean, I hope Amazon appreciates that I'm getting the word out about this, because they're sick of everything going to Jeff after you email seller performance or product quality, and half an hour later you don't have an answer and you immediately start writing to Jeff, because that's what's going on. People are writing to Jeff about everything. Yeah. I'm sure there are emails about the color of his t-shirt that day that people don't like, that they're emailing Jeff about. So understand that all of those emails that go to Jeff, it's a blizzard, and your email is mixed in with that blizzard. It doesn't mean you won't get a response at all, and it doesn't mean you won't get a response, even sometimes a timely response. But understand that there are people on the other side of those escalations that need to sort you out from the buyer complaints, from the brand complaints, from any complaint, into the seller queues, and then divide it up from there. It's much better to at least send one escalation. I'm not saying waste your time doing it over and over if you're not getting anywhere, but send at least one escalation asking for a product quality team manager or a senior investigator to look over the information you've sent before you start, writing to Jeff or escalating to other managers on teams that aren't the team that suspended the listing.
Yeah.
It'll go a lot easier on you, and sometimes you can avoid writing to Jeff altogether. And they're not going to be that surprised when you're asking for this type of stuff, because people are asking for managers to look over investigations by product quality team members every day. And there's a reason for that. Some of the investigations are done very quickly. Some of the accounts are very poorly annotated, so that the investigator who comes after the last guy can't even figure out what's going on with your appeal. But it's not just documentation, right? I mean, sometimes they ask you for a plan of action, and then we get back into some of the other things we've talked about in the past, which is how good is your plan of action?
Yeah.
And there's no point in escalating. I guess I've talked about this, so I'm blue in the face, but I'll say it one more time. There's absolutely no point writing to Jeff, writing to a PQ team manager or anyone else if your plan of action is only 50%. Yeah. 50% of the way there.
Well, the other thing I wanted to kind of mention here, because there's a couple of other flaws that can appear for some people. Let's just say, when I'm manufacturing, I might be manufacturing and sending to the US and UK. So it would all appear on that same invoice. because, you know, these invoices are not designed for Amazon systems to
Right.
follow up when you have these kind of claims, right? As much as Amazon probably thinks the world revolves around them, but they're simply not designed that way. So the quantities.
How so? What do you mean by that? How are they not designed to?
All right. Okay. Right. So basically, you want to send them invoices based over the last 365 days, right? So ideally, you want to tie them up because this is about being authentic. So you want to go, right, shipping plans, units, tie those up, right? Just because you want to reconcile the numbers. Yeah. But let's just say you send 5,000 units to the UK and 5,000 units to the US on that same invoice. That invoice is not going to match when you send that into the UK because they're going to go, well, where's these other 5,000 units? It said here 10,000 units, but you've only shipped in X amount to Amazon. And that was another issue with my invoices as well.
Quantity, right?
The quantity issue has changed, right?
That's become a lot worse. They've been really sticklers about quantity lately. Yeah.
So, you know, from my discussions with people, other people, it's, fine. If you're selling and manufacturing in the US and you're doing domestically, all of your invoicing probably lines up really sweet. Yeah. So you're going from your manufacturer to your prep center and your prep center being sent into Amazon. So your invoices over the last 365 days look bang on, hardly any work to do. Because you can actually pull up your shipment ID and tie that in with the invoice numbers so that it's annotated on a spare set of invoices. But it all gets screwed up once you send into multiple territories. And why would you do it any other way if you're an international company?
You wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
the other side of that, the other side of that, though, is that I haven't heard a lot of this being a problem the way you described.
Yeah, but you know me. I always tend to find all the problems and work them out and then share them with the audience. So I tend to get everything. You know,
you've got unique problems that I don't hear about.
Yeah, often. Exactly. I get hit with a shit stick. Don't worry about that.
Right.
Okay. So
you're the unlucky guy. So.
I am the unlucky guy. I was the guy who had all his stock on the Hanjin. You know, like the shipping company that went down a few years ago. Yeah, it happened to be my Christmas stock on one of their shipments.
Yeah. The wrong shipping company,
but it makes for good content anyway. But the other thing I was going to say to you is, let's go back to these claims and what you've seen where you pretty much know it's the competition trying to take people out the game.
Yeah, I mean, you're not, unless you have a smoking gun and you can really prove in a limited amount of space that your sloppy, disorganized competitor is using their own buyer accounts to buy from you, you're not going to get anywhere. Telling Amazon, I mean, we're way past the point where people can blame brands for trying to get them kicked off listings simply by making an IP complaint or an inauthentic complaint because, you know, I have the right of resale and there's no legal reason I can't sell these items. Amazon doesn't want to listen to this stuff anymore. And they don't care unless you're going to litigate it, to be honest. And they don't want to listen to anybody blaming buyers anymore for like trying to get free return shipping. They're so far past that. They're numb to that. You're wasting space and you're wasting your own time if you say those things.
Yeah.
So it has to be a proactive plan. If they're asking you for a plan of action, you really have to get into how you're going to improve things. Any of us, whether we're consultants or sellers, could be improving something about our business. So you have to look at it that way as an improvement plan. What could I improve about quality control? What could I improve about my, you know, whether it's my inspection process or even inspecting the listings that you're on to make sure that the items are 100% matching. That's what they need to hear. I'm not saying that this robotic system that they've set up makes sense to me because it doesn't. Totally. I'm not saying I agree with it because I don't, but this is the universe we inhabit. Yeah. And if they will not listen, I mean, if you've got great information, I've got these buyer orders, I know they're associated with a buyer account that my competitor's using and I can prove it, I can show it to you. All you have to do is look in your tools. They might look in their tools and see, yes, that's a buyer account associated with a seller, and we're going to punish that seller for buying from you and alleging that these items are inauthentic. I used to do this myself, right? But in those days, people were a lot sloppier about it. It was a lot easier to connect buyer accounts to seller accounts.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, I got these pathetic excuses once I warned the sellers for doing this kind of abuse. They'd say, well, I know they're a competitor, but this item is authentic and we still think it's not the way it's supposed to be listed. Essentially, they were confessing to having done it. So people are doing it in sloppy ways still, but you can't hang your hat on that. And you're going to waste a lot of time people are wasting all this time finger pointing. It's not that they don't know that this happens. Of course they know that the marketplace is rife with sellers doing anything in their power to take each other out.
Yeah.
It's just that, you're not going to get anywhere with that argument. If you were in Seattle and you were sitting down with these people and they gave you 45 minutes to show them things on your laptop and to show them links and to show them orders, sure, maybe you'd get somewhere. You'll never have that opportunity unless they're inviting you to Seattle to sit down with them and show them this stuff, which very few sellers get.
Yeah.
In the meantime, don't waste time on seller support, right? Talking to them, they don't know what you're talking about. They don't care. They don't have any authority over it. Make sure you're doing this stuff with, well-written communication. I mean, that's what people need to focus on.
I know. I was going to say, I know now the trend is to obviously have everything outside of Amazon because of the long-term storage fees. But I mean, this was when I got that suspension.
Yeah.
Kind of the mess it puts you in, because obviously you have to pull out all the stock and take account of it for your plan of action.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the day that I decided, look, I'm just sending in on velocity. So that's one of the other key things, because even when you send all your stock into Amazon, you might have sent a brand new shipment in. You just get that claim, and then you've got to pull out a few thousand units at 60 cents a unit or whatever it is.
Yeah, I know. Removal orders. Yeah.
Wait 2 or 3 weeks for it to all come back from the different facility centers, and they come back in these shitty boxes, not the ones that you sent them in. And then they've all got to get repacked. So that's that was a big lesson learned a couple of years back. But I'm definitely, we've refined that just-in-time method across our accounts, which works well for us now, and obviously saves us money on short-term and long-term storage fees.
We still help people. We still help people do appeals with removal orders mentioned in them, and we say that we're temporarily deactivating listings, but we don't wait until everything comes back before we say, well, now we've inspected all these units and we know exactly what's wrong. We tell them that we figured out what's wrong. We are doing the product removal, but we've figured out what's wrong already.
Right.
And we've already fixed it. That's the basis of the appeal. And it's worth mentioning as well. Well, go on.
Yeah, no, it's good that you said that, because I think what happens is the consensus is you may have appealed a couple of times, realize you've got to do a plan of action. You send in your plan of action, but you don't want to take a chance that because Amazon checking all these facts, it's like the cat with 9 lives. So the last thing you want to do is put in your appeal to say that we're going to do the checks without actually physically doing the checks first. But what you're saying is you can put in the removal order, give the removal order ID, I suppose. Yeah. And then even though they're waiting for them to come back, you can still put in your plan of action, which will mean that your listing could be activated again quicker than waiting for
it means a lot to them. It means a lot to them to see that you're pulling the inventory. And that's something I've confirmed with internal. They care about that. So that's really, really important. Plus, a lot of people just send a message, well, you've got tons of our stuff in FBA. Why don't you open up some of it? Why don't you figure out if it's authentic or not? Again, you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time, because if they read that, they're like, this person doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's one message I really need to impart to everyone today is if you lose them early in whatever you send, a plan of action, a short email saying what kind of documentation you've got attached, if you start sending stuff like that, they will stop reading. They won't even look at your plan of action half the time if they're like, this person doesn't get it, and he or she is standing up and waving saying, I don't get it, I want to resist, I want to fight. I take this as an opportunity to defend myself, to defend the quality of my company or my inventory. If you're going to resist, that's going to be their attitude. That's going to be their response. They've got 13 or 14 or 15 of you to go through in an hour. Otherwise, they get dinged for their metrics. So they got to keep it moving.
Yeah.
And if you're, like I said, standing up and waving and saying, I'm not worth reading, they will pass you over. And that's what a lot of people get stuck. That's why this takes, weeks instead of days for some people, because they just don't understand how to communicate in a way that will be considered acceptable by the other side.
Cool.
So,
well, before we wrap, let's quickly touch on the POA and.
Yeah, I had one other thing to say about that. Because this is really important. Even if you get an inauthentic complaint for something where you don't have any more inventory, you don't care about it, you're fine with deleting the listing and even pulling all the inventory out of FBA, still try to get it reinstated. And that's because, the algorithms that they're using to figure out whether or not you should be manually reviewed for an account level suspension are at least in part triggered by unresolved complaints about authenticity, of course, safety, also notice claims of infringement, that many marks against your account. At least resolve the mark against your account by appealing properly, getting the item reinstated, and then you can just decide on your own not to resell it or send them any more inventory. But at least make an attempt to respond on some level. Even if you're not going to get the ASIN reinstated, at least get your account annotated saying, we're pulling the inventory, we've deleted the listing, we're not going to sell this anymore. But even better than that is to actually get the ASIN reinstated, because you can effectively consider that mark against you resolved. So that might be the most important thing I say today, because that reduces the likelihood that the account will be suspended.
Yeah.
So
makes total sense.
Okay.
So contents of the plan of action. Just give us some basic points here, what you think needs to be included.
Right. And we probably talked about this before, but short introduction, 2 or 3 sentences indicating, certainly not just restating you suspended us for inauthentic complaints. They already know that. Indicating that you understand exactly why you received inauthentic complaints, and you're about to tell them how you've accounted for that, for all the steps and the measures have already been put into place. You fixed it, and you're about to tell them how.
Yeah.
A brief, short, bulleted section saying what the root causes of the inauthentic complaints were, and with the online course membership that I have, this is something in our Facebook private Facebook group we deal with every day. People are giving us. They start with the root causes. I always preach, if you don't nail the root causes, they won't even read the POA. And people keep giving us root causes that aren't root causes. So don't just focus on, we received complaints from a couple buyers that the items didn't match the listings. They already know that. Or we received item condition complaints from buyers for this and that ASIN, or they didn't like the quality. They already know that. Don't tell them what they already know. That's the what. Tell them the why. Why did you get the complaints? Why were there a lack of inspection procedures in place? Or how. Focus on why or how, but not the what. And most people, I guess it's a psychological thing, just want to say what the what is. So that's the root causes, the why and the how you got the complaints, couple bullets on that, and then the plan of action. Again, numbers or bullets. All the proactive solutions, make sure they're convincing. Make sure you get into some details, not, we're increasing the training for our picking and packing teams. Well, I mean, how will that be effective? Why will that work? What are you doing exactly? We're reviewing our listings better. How are you How are you reviewing them better? A lot of people are just really short on details because they fixate on what I say about keeping it to a page, keeping it short, direct, concise bullets, which is true. But make sure those bullets have real information in them. Don't be vague. Don't be general, because then they start thinking you're borrowing from generic templates that you found online. Yeah. And they throw it away. So
cool.
Yeah.
Makes total sense. Cool. Yeah. Let's wrap that there. Best way to reach you, etc.
Right. So in terms of my last point about resolving some of these complaints, how you correspond with Amazon, ecommercechris.com, of course, is my website. ecommercechris.com/membership is the online course membership, where we're teaching people how to review their own accounts instead of, hiring me to do it every time, just giving you the methodology and my approach, which works pretty well for preventing suspensions.
Cool. Excellent, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Chris, again, thank you for coming in. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Other than that, we'll see you again soon. Take care.